Hi, class. I'm Brianna Black, and I'm excited to be with you for our final learning teaching interaction. Um, I'm excited to share with you what I've learned this week. For me, I felt a lot of spiritual connections, so bear with me if I add a lot of gospel insight to it. So, in chapter 3 of our family life education textbook, it talked about that evaluation can be scary. And for me, that's true, because you work so hard on a program, and then have someone critique it, maybe it feels like it undermines everything you worked for. You don't want to hear those negative things, but it calmed my fears to remember that evaluation has a purpose. And I try to think of it like when Sister Dilworth gives us feedback. For me, it's a lot easier to get feedback from an instructor rather than maybe an audience, because your audience, you're trying to be a professional, and so it's kind of embarrassing if they see your flaws. But when Sister Dilworth gives me feedback, I actually find a lot of comfort in it, especially because we can resubmit it. It's how can I do better next time, so that we can work towards perfection. And for me, I thought about this like the journey of discipleship. And everyone has room for improvement. And that goes for family life education as well. And no matter how long we've been doing it, there will always be room for improvement. And just like discipleship, we will never be perfect in this life. So I would like to move on and start talking about setting goals. Um, Goals are great, but if we don't take time to evaluate them, then they kind of lose their purpose. We might find ourselves straying and possibly forgetting our purpose too. Like the gospel, these goals can help keep our lives on the right path. For the gospel, it's reflecting and repenting. For family life education, it's reflecting and correcting, and being creative and adding new strategies to teaching our goals. So moving on to the next week's readings, we talked about ethics. For me, this was a major gospel connection, staying within boundaries. While some of the code of ethics kind of seemed like common sense, there's some that it's important to have the principle whenever there are complex situations. For instance, in the case study about the mother and son who the father was abusive, and there's a lot of different things that might stop us from feeling comfortable about sharing that information to who would take care of that in the community. And for instance, we know that the father takes the family away from people who are going to help them. It might cause stronger abuse if something were to go wrong where they didn't get the help they needed. But we have to remember, even though these are breaking social norms, mind your own business, and the privacy principle that's also in the Code of Ethics, I came up with a statement that helps me see things straight, and that safety overrules privacy. And that goes for anything that goes in the medical field. The purpose is keeping families together, and if families aren't safe, then we're kind of missing the point there. So also in the ethics reading, we learned about aspiration versus mandatory ethics. I think of this as the higher law aspiration. Mandatory, I kind of thought of the Ten Commandments or the Law of Moses. Well, it's great to have those boundaries, and if we can stay within them, we know that we're safe. And those boundaries are there for a reason. We can check our goals and make sure that that we are staying within those. Kind of like when we set goals at the beginning of our programs, we need to evaluate those. And if we have nothing to evaluate, then we might get lost. But also, the spirit of the law guides us in our teaching. It helps us go beyond just staying within those boundaries. It helps us care about our participants. And when we do that, I think everything falls into place when we have the best interest of the audience. I really liked that aspect of the lesson. So, speaking of boundaries, this past week we learned about boundaries, and I love that they split into levels, because for me, I kind of need more of a visual. For instance, I went to the doctor today, and they had a scale from 1 to 10. Number 1 being I'm good, number 3 I could use some help, and then 10 is just they're bawling their eyes out. So I like that they divided, I think it was 5 different levels. And it's important to have these boundaries, because not only do we want to make sure that participants are receiving the most appropriate treatment that we, at this point, probably aren't qualified for if it's related to therapy, but if we enter therapy mode, even if we were qualified, we probably wouldn't have the time or background or depth that we need to address those problems. And so that wouldn't really be fair to the participants, and it might kind of be awkward too. Some things are a little in depth. But level 2, that it was kind of more of advice and just spilling out information. And I kind of thought about this as the safety zone, because at the beginning of the reading, it was talking about how, there could be some awkward stories being told that would reach beyond our limits. But, if good family life educators don't want to avoid experiences altogether. And so level 3 is better, where you kind of gently probe for experiences, but it takes a lot of skill, and I think most importantly the Holy Ghost, to know how to keep the lesson on track, and to know how to ask the right questions. For me, asking the right questions is a really big one. But these are my thoughts in this short amount of time. But thank you all for taking this time to listen. I look forward to your feedback.